a buddy of mine convinced me to get my real estate license. So he said if I can sell X amount of houses, and I'm going to just go for this.
Hey guys, John McClellan here. Just continuing part of our series of interviewing different professionals around town. Today we have Chris Templeton with Reliance Realty Group and Pflugerville Realty. He's a broker of record. Chris, thanks for being here today. Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, little disclaimer here. Chris and I are actually friends too, so I'm going to go a little light on some of the questions with him, but hopefully he digs a little deep for me. Chris, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I live in the Pflugerville area and have a beautiful wife of 8.5 years, 2 little girls, 4 and 5-year-old princesses that are our world for sure.
I've seen the Facebook pictures. I've seen them in person.
They are completely adorable. I have one that wants to collect seashells for a living when she gets older.
Nice.
And the other one wants to sell houses like daddy and be a doctor and be a police officer. So
whatever time of the month it is,
exactly.
Right? That's what she's going to do. Yeah.
And she'll be supporting the other one for sure. Gotcha. With her seashell adventure.
Well, 20 years ago, if somebody told me there would be electronic Bitcoin and it would be worth money, I would have laughed at them. So maybe seashells is the next thing.
This is true.
She may be ahead of her time.
No doubt.
So tell me a little bit about where you're from. Did you grow up in Central Texas, or are you from another part of Texas?
So I grew up actually down in Port Aransas, down on the coast. Tiny town, moved up here about 14 years ago. So gotcha. I've been here since then. Moved up here straight out of college, basically for a job opportunity. And
what was it like growing up in Port Aransas, Texas? And obviously, I know a lot of our viewers today probably have been to Port Aransas on vacations, renting condos and things like that. Absolutely. And as a kid, I used to go down there too, and it's definitely changed. What was it like, growing up there?
So growing up, we were extremely sheltered. There was not a lot for us to do at the time, and it's strange when you live there because you take for granted completely that you could walk 30 seconds and be on the beach.
Right.
Obviously, you can drive on the beach there as well. But the other thing is fishing. People go down there to go fishing and go to the beach, and those are the two things that we hardly ever did living there because you do take it for granted. Mm-hmm. As soon as you move away, every time you go back, it's like, all right, when can we fish? How fast can we get to the beach? So it's weird to see the change that happens.
Yeah. Now, I know a couple of years ago, there was a major hurricane event in Port Aransas, and I understand you still have a lot of family there. Tell a little bit about the personal experience you had with that. One of it's, 30, 40 years since one's hit in that area, right?
Correct. We've been saying we're due every year, and we've been due for a hurricane for a really long time. It seems that it always shifts at the last second and doesn't hit Port Aransas. We're always spared. And this last Hurricane Harvey, I was actually down in Port Aransas with my wife and kids. We were just down there hanging out. My entire family lives there. No one else has left Port Aransas besides me. And we were down there just on vacation, hanging out with my family, and it went from a Category 1 to a Category 4 basically overnight. So something that no one was worried about to, holy cow, we got to get out of here. I ended up having to board up just about all of my family's houses. I personally have 2 down there as well, but we ended up boarding up 6 or 7 houses. My dad was injured, so he couldn't really help much. He tried his best, but yeah, it was crazy. I have an older brother too that was there, but he works for the county water department, and they had tons of stuff to do, so he couldn't break away to come help us.
Now, from the pictures I saw, there was some major flooding in your houses and your parents' house.
Correct. So my parents' house sits about 4 feet off the ground, and they had about a foot of water in their house. My sister's house is right next door, and she had 59 inches of water in the downstairs. So one of our other properties that's there, we ended up with about 2 feet of water.
And this isn't like normal water like you would see here in Austin, Texas. This is the ocean coming into your house, right?
Exactly. So most people think if a hurricane hits, the water's coming over the dunes from the beach side of things. And what happened was the seawall actually broke. So the entire Gulf of Mexico basically came into Port Aransas and then washed out with the tide. So we were blessed in one sense that it did come and go. So it wasn't just standing water like the Katrina, for example,
right,
where it just stayed there for months. So it made it way more difficult for them to get cleaned up and things like that. So
tell me about how the community as a whole came together after that event. Because I know you're really big into community. You do have a lot of charitable things that you do here in Austin, Texas, but obviously I think you may have picked part of the love of that up from just growing up in a small community. So how did that community react?
Yeah, so what's unique about Port Aransas is if someone's house were to burn down, the entire town rallies for that one person. It's truly a town where everybody would take the shirt off their back to help their neighbor. What was unique and different in a bad way about Hurricane Harvey was obviously their homes were destroyed. Some were destroyed more than others, obviously, but everybody had significant damage down there. So it wasn't like the entire town could rally around one person. There were still people that would rally their troops, and they were helping other people get their homes. The town basically categorized it as, if there was an elderly person that needed it immediately, they didn't have the flexibility of being able to go somewhere else, stay in a hotel, things like that, the town would get together, leave their own houses, don't even mess with those, to go help other people. And that's where my mindset on life was shaped down there, because there are so many people that would give you the shirt off their back. And a lot of people say that, but that town truly comes together. It's a town of about 2,500, maybe 3,000 people by now.
On an island.
On an island. With tourist season, it can explode to over 100 and 150,000 people are there at one time. So a lot of the restaurant owners, for example, left their houses completely, got their restaurant repaired because they knew their employees needed a place to work so they could make money, so they could then get things fixed on their own personal property.
So I know you're involved in a bunch of charities here in the Austin area. How did that growing up in the small town Texas on an island where everybody's looking out for each other, how does that translate to who you are now and what you're doing with some of the community activities?
So I learned early on that being able to help other people, to me, truly, selfishly, I get so much out of helping other people. I've been the same person since I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and now obviously making more money than I did when I was 7, I'm able to help more and more people, but the core of who I am and who I've always been was shaped from Port Aransas, because you could see people helping people nonstop. Yeah. And that is why I actually moved to Pflugerville, was because at the time it was still a small town. There's over 50,000 people there now, but it still does have a small town feel overall.
Now, you mentioned earlier you went to college, and after you got out of college, you moved to Pflugerville, but you didn't come here as a real estate agent, right?
That is correct. So I went to school, got a degree for education. I was an elementary school teacher for a few years when I moved up here. So I was working in Pflugerville ISD, taught for 3 years, and in my 3rd year, a buddy of mine convinced me to get my real estate license. So getting my real estate license, I said, if I can sell X amount of houses and have more than $4 in my savings account like I did when I was a teacher, I'm going to just go for this.
And I believe your wife was a teacher too?
Yes. Yeah. So my wife and I actually met at the school that I was teaching at. So we taught across the hallway from each other.
No PDAs, I hope.
None. It is funny to see.
So you met your wife when she was the teacher across the hallway?
Yep. Absolutely. So it's in my campus that I taught on our campus that we both taught on was a brand new campus. So the principal picked a ton of people fresh out of college. So we had a nice group of 50 staff members, that most of which were same age. And we really got to grow together in that.
Well, it seems to me it takes a servant's heart to be a teacher nowadays, based on the pay that they get, and hard times sometimes. Not a lot of help from parents. So, how do you think that teaching elementary school teachers? How do you think that helps you in real estate? Elementary school students, excuse me.
Sure. So, I think it allows you to see. You get a good idea of a community as a whole. So in your class, you may have someone who's one of my first years, his dad was in the Secret Service, right? And then you have one that, unfortunately, dad's been in prison for the last 10 years or 5 years, whatever it may be. So there's a whole gamut of types of families, and you obviously don't handpick who's coming into your classroom. So it helps to get to be able to learn how to deal with because you're dealing with the parents also. It's not just the kids. So learning how to work with people.
Yeah, empathize with them. Yeah,
exactly.
And I think you said the key word there. They're all families too, right?
Exactly.
And that's why we're in business. At the beginning of the day, obviously we're trying to take care of our families and earn money so we can make a living. But a major portion of that is getting families into homes. And I think that being a real estate agent that has a servant's heart may differentiate yourself from maybe others out there. So I know, you've been a very successful real estate broker. Obviously, you're not teaching anymore. What are some of the charities that you have picked in your area of Central Texas that you're proud of?
Sure. So one that everyone knows, I've been working as a volunteer, as a wish granter with MakeAWish. A lot of fun. We get to partner up. My cousin and I actually signed him up as well. So MakeAWish reaches out to us. They tell us so-and-so has been approved for a wish. We need our volunteers to go out, meet with the family in their home, figure out what the kid's wish is. We fill out a bunch of paperwork. We send it back to corporate. And then once corporate approves it and gets everything scheduled, they call us back and say we need to do a send-off party, normally at a place like Dave & Buster's, so the kids can have some fun while they're finding out. So parents obviously know the wish has been granted. Mm-hmm. Kids don't know anything yet until that moment when we're able to surprise them.
Do you have a cool story about Make-A-Wish?
I've got a lot of cool stories about Make-A-Wish. Yeah. One of which at Dave & Buster's we were doing a send-off party, and the kid obsessed with Batman. So I always get crazy ideas in my mind, and I have a great network of people that love to help others. And I reached out on Facebook and said, does anybody have or know of somebody that has a Batmobile, the real thing?
Right.
And I got offers of matte black Lamborghinis, you name it, Ferraris. And then one person said, my neighbor actually owns the old Batmobile.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up getting in contact with the owner of the car and also found a Batman
impersonator, basically.
Yeah, who had the real deal Batman costume.
Yeah.
So this kid not only
was it circa 1960s or 2000s?
No, Dark Knight.
Okay,
type.
Nice.
Yeah. So the costume itself was impressive.
Yeah.
So we set up basically for this kid to have a send-off party at Dave & Buster's. He had no idea what else was going on. He didn't even know that was coming. As far as knowing his wish has been granted, his parents just told him we're going to Dave & Buster's for dinner and to play some games. Mm-hmm. So I actually coordinated with the help of others, Batman being there, surprising him, and the Batmobile being parked outside. So he got to come outside, get in the Batmobile, ride around the parking lot in the Batmobile, and just little things like that kids will remember that stuff for the rest of their life.
Yeah. That reminds me of a story you told me the other day about when you were actually teaching and some of the things that you did with your kids. And there was one in particular where you had a contest throughout the year, right?
Yes. So in my final year of teaching, we had what was called role models in the class. And obviously we all know what a role model is. Well, second graders don't typically know what a role model is. So they had to earn the status of role model throughout the year. And they could get it pulled from role model status as well if they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing and helping others and things like that. So I told them something pretty cool is going to be happening at the end of the year if you're a role model. So if you have the status, when the time comes towards the end of the year, you're going to be able to participate in this.
Yeah. Now, did they have the opportunity to win it back if they lost
it? They did, yeah,
of course.
So some of them...
Just like life, right?
Right. And some of them, what we did was we made little cheesy crowns that they would wear, or they would have it sitting on their desk so everyone knew they were a role model. So if a principal were to come in or something...
A little social incentive there for them, right?
Some of them would wear them all day, every day, which was pretty cool to see. So it made it clear to
these
the
weren't
entire
high schoolers.
campus. Correct. They were 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
But it gave them pride to be able to say, I am a role model.
What a great teaching moment.
So with that, the surprise at the end of the year ended up being, and of course I cleared all this with the parents, and some parents even donated some money to help out with it. Nice. But we ended up getting a limousine, a stretch limo, to come to the school to pick us up. Kids went home from school that day, they got dressed. All they knew was we're getting dressed for something fancy. And came back to the school, and about 5 o'clock, we get the limo to roll up. And we did a whole red carpet type thing, and I took all of the kids in the limo, which a lot of them have never been in, and we went over to Kobe's Japanese Steakhouse and had a nice dinner where chefs were cooking on the hibachi, and a lot of those kids had never done that either. So just got to have a night out on the town, basically, in a limousine. Had a photographer there taking photos and stuff, so every kid got a disc with all the photos from the evening. But it was a cool way to go out.
Can I ask you a question? Have you seen any of those kids since second grade?
I am actually still friends with a lot of them and their parents. So it's tied into the real estate world just because they knew that that's where I was leaving teaching. I was going to get into that. So it tied in. They call me when it's time to sell a house. They call me when it's time for one of them to buy. I've actually had one of my students contact me to purchase a house, which is
that
really
makes
strange.
You feel old, doesn't it?
It makes you feel really old. A few years back, I got an invitation to a wedding, and I was like, hold on. I taught this kid when she was 9 years old, and here she is getting married. And small world, but her husband he's been in the military in Japan, and he's coming back over here, and he's already working on his real estate license, and he's going to come work for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it all ties together. And
was she a role model in the class?
She was.
Oh, nice.
She was.
Does she still remember that?
She remembers it all. Absolutely.
That's great.
So it's neat, and then obviously I love the teaching aspect of life, and being able to teach now all of the agents that I have that work for me means a lot.
Yeah,
So,
well, and that's kind of a great segue to my next question. What's your favorite, being a real estate broker now, what's your favorite part of real estate?
my favorite part of real estate is that there's never the same day. So each day is different. You never know what you're going to get hit with. You guys, obviously, in the mortgage business, there's surprises that pop up left and right. So it keeps things interesting, and you're able to help a lot of families get into homes that never thought it would be possible, things like that. So
Right.
it's nice to be able to mentor the agents that I do have working for me, and there's no secret that I'm molding them into doing exactly what I've done over the years. They'll be agents for a while, and then hopefully they get their broker's license and get to keep moving up.
Right. Do you do role model hats for your agents?
I think that's a good idea. I think we're going to implement that.
Maybe a little tag or
Yeah.
something instead of a crown to put
No,
on their
we're
head,
gonna
right?
make the same construction paper crown, and they're gonna have to wear it around
I
town.
like it.
So
I like
think
it a
they'll
lot.
love it.
Well, so I want to kind of drill down. So you're a real estate broker now. What part? You're in Pflugerville, Texas. Obviously, Reliance Realty you're all
Statewide,
over,
yeah.
statewide. Tell us a little bit about your business and what's your kind of your demographic for who you like to help, and what parts of Texas do you focus on?
Sure. So we have agents across the state. I don't let our agents sell where they're not supposed to be selling. If they don't know about the area, we refer it out to somebody, which is a lot of brokers in town do the same thing.
Yeah.
There are those stragglers that, oh yeah, I sell in Waxahachie.
Yeah, well, I have tell people who want to invest in real estate, and sometimes first-time investors, and I'm like, whatever you do, make sure when you buy a house, you buy it in a neighborhood, in a town that you're very familiar with. Don't go out 100, 200 miles away and expect that somebody's going to give you exactly the advice that you're looking for. You have to know it yourself, right? And same thing with agents, right?
Absolutely.
You can't give great advice on Waxahachie, right?
Yeah. And so Port Aransas is a great example going back to that. I get calls, many calls a week saying, hey, can you help? I got a buyer from other agents. I got a buyer that wants to buy a house in Rockport. Well, I know where Rockport is. Obviously, it's very close to Port Aransas. But if it's not Port Aransas real estate, I don't help them.
That's 2 counties and a ferry.
Right. And I don't pretend to know that market as well as you would need to know it to be able to. And the example I always give is you don't want to sell someone a house that backs to this big, beautiful field. Well, the rest of the town knows that big old Walmart building's coming in their backyard.
Or a sewage plant.
Yeah, exactly. So I actively sell in our area here and then down in Port Aransas.
And I will tell you that it's very specialized down on the coast too.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, just insurance alone nowadays, especially after Harvey, has gone through the roof. And you've got to look at all those things. A lot of people, in fact, when I go down there a lot, answer this question for me. I always see a lot of for sale signs all the time. It's like everybody's trying to sell their house. They just throw them on.
Yeah, so what happens is that town is so small. There's in Port Aransas, for example, there's over 100 real estate agents in Port Aransas alone. And like I said,
10% of the population.
Yeah, like I said before, there's 2,500 people to 3,000 people.
Yeah.
And down there, it's so uber competitive who's going to get the listing because everyone knows everybody. Mm-hmm. So you're having to pick one person out of 100.
And they all know about it.
Yeah, and they all know about it because they drive by that house and see someone else's sign in the yard. So it's down there, like I said, it's extremely specialized. You have the vacation rentals and things like that you have to know about, which I own myself. And I've always prided myself on, I'm going to give advice that I would or have already taken myself.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't do it, I'm not going to let you do it because the repercussions at the end of the day aren't going to be worth making a quick commission and then you're calling me 2 years later.
Yeah, even an investment property can, if you don't do it right, if you don't, because the old adage is you make your money when you buy the house, not when you sell it, right?
Absolutely. So, and like I said, down there's more short-term rental properties now than there are full-time homesteaded properties in Port Aransas. Yeah. There's actually more rental properties than there are people in the whole population, which is nuts.
How does the city of Port Aransas think about that?
It's money.
Yeah. So they need a good tax base, right?
And that entire town is built off of tourism. So especially after Hurricane Harvey, a lot of these condominiums are still demolished. And, and windows were all blown out. You can look straight through an entire 3,000 foot wide condominium complex. You can look straight through it because they still haven't made it to the point of starting the remodel. Yeah. And those owners of those properties, they're still having to fork over $700, $800 a month on their HOA dues. Yeah. And can't
plus
even
property
use their
taxes.
place. Yeah, plus the property taxes.
Yeah. So just kind of want to wrap it up just a little bit here. What are some advice, especially in the market that we're in right now? It's obviously very, very tight inventory here in the Austin area, some all-time lows when it comes to months of inventory, and the house actives to pendings ratio is extremely low too. A lot of people are looking into new construction. What kind of advice would you give a potential home buyer if they're looking for a house, can't find a resale, they decide to go with the new construction?
Sure. So first and foremost, have somebody representing you and your best interests. It doesn't cost you anything out of pocket. The builders have already all set money aside for their marketing, and they pay the commission to agents. So I tell people, even if it's not me that's representing you, make sure you have an agent that knows what they're doing, because there are a lot of different tricks that builders have up their sleeves that you may find out after you close and you move in. Hey, where is my garage door opener?
Right, and they don't use it to prelongate a normal contract either. They all have their own contracts, so you got to be familiar with that. And it's not like they're going to lower the price of the house because you don't have an agent, because all that does is ruin their comps for their next sale.
Exactly. So having somebody on your side to be able to, if an issues always do pop up, but when that issue pops up, you have someone with a little bit of pull to be there to fight for you to make sure these issues are corrected. And again, if it costs you $0 to have professional representation, it's a no-brainer. But a lot of people, and I always go back to when I was a teacher, I had no idea that was the case because I wasn't deep into that world. Right. So the general public to me does not know that. They think, well, I don't have an extra 3% on top of my down payment and my closing costs. I don't have an extra 3% to pay my agent, so I'm just going to go straight to the builder to keep my costs down. And again, they don't realize, and they shouldn't, because this is not the business they do every day, but trying to get the word out for that.
I think it's like going to court, right? And you don't have an attorney, so you know what? I'm just going to use the defense, or the prosecuting attorney will be my attorney too.
Yeah, that's exactly what. That's a great analogy. The only people that sales rep works for, and they're not licensed realtors in most cases, so they don't even have to live by the same code of ethics that we do. Mm-hmm. Those folks only work for the builder. Right. And yes, their goal is to get you into a house,
But they're looking after their employer,
Exactly.
which is their job, right?
Person cutting that check. So
Yeah, and to be fair, it's their job to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Just like it's your job to help the buyer.
For sure. And there's builders out there like Buffington Homes, for example. They do a great job and want you to have a realtor when you're coming in because they know that it limits their liability. They know we can all work as a team. It's not going to get messy. So they actually prefer you to have one. And not all builders are that way, but those guys are great and prefer to work with someone that has an agent that's experienced.
Right. Well, Chris, thank you very much for coming up here today and doing this. I appreciate it.
You bet.
We're going to go down fishing here, I hope, pretty soon.
We're doing it. Let's do it.
All right, guys. Hey, thanks for listening today. Stay tuned for more episodes.